I'm Legislative Vice President for the Associated Gun Clubs of Baltimore. I am also an NRA certified instructor in 5 disciplines and range safety officer, and I hold a Maryland State Police qualified handgun instructor card. I'm going to speak to you primarily tonight about the training component of this legislation. And while we strongly support training, what this will create is an overload of the system. Looking at the numbers the Maryland State Police processed last year, and the fact that only the certified instructors of the state can give this training, we have 168 instructors at the present time. With last year's workload allowing for handgun purchases, we would finish in 1.6 years. So that's if all 168 are working full time at this, never taking a vacation. We would need another 3 months to do the handgun permit carry folks. You have to understand that we instructors are not full-time instructors. We do not do this for a living per se, and we therefore cannot devote this many hours to it. It would be physically and practically impossible for us to achieve this goal for you. Something else that hasn't been looked at is where would we train these people? I know that there was a list of ranges given as part of the study, but no one checked for those ranges to see if they're actually available and willing to carry out this sort of training. This is something that we looked at where we don't know that we have the infrastructure. I would suggest that we bring in police training ranges because we've already paid for those, and we certainly deserve to use them if you choose to pass this legislation. One of the problems with the training component is you have to be 21 to get the license. But we allow people who are younger than 21 to work as security guards and carry firearms. They would be out of work because they couldn't get the firearm that the company would issue to them because they're not old enough yet. So we will, in fact, put a lot of people out of work who are in the security community. This is definitely a bad idea in today's economy. We shouldn't be putting people out of work just because they aren't old enough. We allow them to fight for our country at 18. They certainly should be able to get the training at 18. There's 2 types of training. One, just to get the license to apply to carry, to apply to buy the firearm, but then you have the other half of it if you want a carry permit. The 2 trainings are not congruent, and for the handgun purchase license, it's 5-year interval. For a carry permit, it's a 3-year interval. Because the two courses are not compatible, you would, in theory, be looking at taking both courses at odd intervals and not necessarily be able to get one that is tailored to do both at the same time. The law does not provide for that. We do believe that this whole concept violates the concept of having to do a poll tax. You're paying for a license to do something that is a constitutional right. And I would add very quickly that the cost for the handgun training we estimate to be $432. Cost of the license itself plus the training and the background checks. And the cost for a carry permit would be approximately $70 less. So we're not talking a small amount of money in order to exercise your constitutional right to apply to purchase a firearm.
So you're getting another question.
Thank you,
Sir.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Jocelyn, thank you for coming today. I always appreciate your expertise. We worked together in 2001 on Paris Splendid as a trigger law. You may have been in the room or you may have heard my discussion with Mr. DeMarco about the handgun provisions that exist now and the handgun requirements that are in this bill. I think they're very minimal. I don't know that they do a lot. But he gave a very spirited defense of the handgun provision, saying that it would keep guns out of the hands of criminals because of straw purchases. Do you have any reaction to that?
We were told the very same thing when we went to the 1 gun a month. They said, well, if it's only 1 gun a month, we won't have straw purchases. What happened was, when we went to 1 gun a month, instead of having 1 straw purchaser buying 3 or 4, that would raise the profile. That person would have to be reported to the ATF because of a multiple purchase, and the fact that they bought multiple firearms right away flags them as being not the normal purchaser. So what we did is, we took a great step backwards, and we made every purchaser look the same. They didn't have a different little blip profile than the average purchaser. So you only find out they're a straw purchaser when the things turn up 10, 13 years later. Then you find out that, in fact, this person was a straw purchaser. The people who are doing this are very versatile. They have a lot of money behind them, and they can hire as many straw purchasers as they need. And it's very easy, even with licensing. People say, oh, well, they won't do this. But when a drug dealer comes up to one of his customers and says, you do this for me, free drugs for 6 months, they're going to do it in a heartbeat. And unless they have a record, it's going to go through. It won't impact it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Shane.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. John, thank you for your testimony. I am trying to focus on one really specific component that maybe you can help me on this, and I've been trying to read through all the testimony. And I found something where an individual who I don't think is going to testify, maybe he is, and maybe I'm stealing his thunder, but he was concerned about a specific provision in the bill, new law, this is 5133.1, dealing with the ammunition. And this individual asserts that either knowingly or not, somehow this legislation could be construed to prohibit somebody under the age of 21 from possessing ammunition. And that's going to certainly have a deleterious effect on our hunting community. Is that your read of the bill? Do you, or if that's beyond what you've looked at, then we'll address it later.
The bill is so poorly crafted, a lot of it I've looked at and not been really sure what I was looking at. The way I interpret what was written was that if you are prohibited from owning or purchasing a regulated firearm, you are therefore prohibited from owning or purchasing ammunition. But I believe that in many cases, while you may be prohibited from having a regulated firearm, that you could own a long gun. And that would cause if you had that ammunition, you wouldn't be able to have it. It's an awkward thing any way you look at it. The way it's crafted, it's difficult to know.
Probably regardless of what we do in the bill, it's probably something we should clean up. Okay, thank you.
Senator Raskin, followed by Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for your testimony. My interest was piqued by the colloquy that you had with Senator Getty, where he asked you to address the prior witnesses who talked about the states in which there were licensing regimes and there was a dramatic reduction, at least according to the witnesses, in the number of straw purchases and straw purchasers of guns. And you seem to suggest that nothing's going to stop us, or nothing's going to enable us to stop the criminals, the bad guys, from getting the gun. Basically, you're saying if they've got to trade money or drugs for it, they will get it. And so I just want to understand your testimony correctly. Are you basically saying that there's really nothing that can be done? Because I had heard some prior witnesses say the problem with this legislation is that it sweeps too broadly. And I agree, it sweeps broadly. And again, if we knew who to keep the guns from, we would just zero in and target the legislation, the assault weapons ban on those people. But since we don't, we sweep more broadly, right? But you seem to be saying that the criminals are going to get the guns regardless. There's really nothing that can be done until after a Columbine, a Newtown, a Virginia attack takes place. We just, if they haven't killed themselves already, then we prosecute the people. I mean, is that basically your point?
I would say to you that after we did one gun a month, the state police came in and said that they needed to have straw purchase be a state offense as well as the federal offense that it was at the time. This body agreed, it became a state offense. That was going to cure the problem. That was going to be the solution to the straw purchase. The plain and simple truth is, laws do not control human behavior. Laws do not prevent crimes. Laws simply define unacceptable behavior and provide penalties when you violate that unacceptable border.
So I want to make sure I heard you correctly, because basically you're saying there's nothing that we can, and that might be right, it might be wrong, but you're saying there's nothing that can be done to prevent those kinds of massacres from happening.
Unless we go to a draconian society, even then, because every society will get whatever it wants. The Pakistanis on hand-run machinery used to build absolutely beautiful copies of the British Enfield, right down to the proof marks. They built firearms in caves in Vietnam, functional firearms. As far as what will be banned, there's no place, and I would challenge anyone in this room to tell me that even though we have a ban on the illegal drugs, you can't sell, you can't purchase, you can't possess, you can't transport, Is anybody in this room going to tell me that we couldn't walk 4 blocks away and buy drugs?
Well, we also have a ban on murder, which is routinely violated.
That makes my point exactly.
But is that an argument for repealing the law against murder?
No, not at all. But we have to recognize that there are some things that we cannot control. And if we cannot control the perpetrator, what we need to do is pass legislation that allows the victim to not be a defenseless victim. We're doing everything we can against the victims. We're doing
Not a basketball game.
nothing that would curtail the perpetrator. When the perpetrator is there, the victim is there, the first person on the scene, other than the perpetrator, will be the victim.
Yeah.
What happens to them will happen because what they do or fail to do or are unable to do in the first 30 seconds of the encounter. When the police arrive, all they do is write the report. When you look at these school shootings, it was all over before the police got there, and we ended up with the best equipped, best armed janitors on the planet.
So, I mean, just to complete the circle here, and we might not be able to resolve this, but if you take the school shooting, the most recent horrific one in Newtown, the gun owner there, Mrs. Lanza, had her guns used against her to kill her, also to go out to assassinate 26 other innocent people. So how did her possession of guns help her, a victim, defend herself against the perpetrator?
She was asleep at the time that she was killed. But by the same token, when we look at that, suppose instead of stealing the firearm from his mother, suppose he'd stolen it from a law enforcement officer and used that same pistol with his 15-round magazine and the 2 spare magazines that all law enforcement officers carry. He could have done the very same thing.
But would you agree that he's got a much better chance of stealing it from his mother or father or someone he knows than from a police officer? The only people allowed to have assault weapons or law enforcement personnel who are trained to store them safely?
Depends on your planning level. He definitely planned this.
Thank you very much.
Senator Davis.
Well, Newtown was obviously so tragic. I don't know anybody in this room that wasn't affected emotionally by what happened. We often hear, you know, if this will just save one life, it's worth it. How do you argue with that?
I would say, tell me which life was saved. Tell me which life would have been saved if this law had been in place. We can show plenty of people who weren't saved because they couldn't defend themselves. But to say if it only saves one life, it's a non-starter because you can't point to that life that ever was saved.
On the other hand, how many lives have been saved by people like the woman in Georgia who talked to her husband on the phone and he instructed her on how to shoot the pistol, and she shot the man that was going to kill her and her kids. That life was saved because she had a gun.
And probably it was saved long before the police arrived.
Very long before the police arrived. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.